Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, the East Bay's best podcast. Hosted by Jared Asch, bringing you in-depth conversations with the leaders shaping your community.
Welcome to today's episode of the Capstone Conversation. Today, we are going to dive into the not so exciting, but extremely important world of municipal finance. How does it work? Why is it different than your business, your household, a school district even? And where are there similarities? And what should an elected official, a city manager, or even the general public know? Today, I am joined by attorneys Splend Splendoria from down in the Tri-Valley. Splend, thank you for being here with me.
Thanks, Jared, and thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about what I think is pretty exciting, but I doubt my kids do.
Tell us a little bit more about your background and how you're coming to this topic.
I appreciate that because I've been involved in as an appointed official in government for 20 plus years. I've been fortunate that a lot of the local government folks or municipalities have asked me to sit on various boards over the years. And I just took a liking to financial aspect of how government earns its revenue and how it provides its services, how those revenues and how they spend them impacts the quality of our lives. Alameda County, I've sat on back in the day, a small planning commission called the Board of Zoning Adjustments. But then for the last almost 20 years, I've sat on something called LAFCO, which is Local Agency Formation Commission. And I've spent a lot of time just thinking about and discussing infrastructure, what it costs for the government to provide our basic services that we all expect, whether that's a street or that the water is provided or that the storm drains aren't clogged, things like that, or providing trails, things like that. And then lately, for the last 5 years, I've sat on the Alameda Health System Board of Trustees, which is the public health system for the entire county. And that is always a financial struggle because we can't print money, but we're required to provide basic health services for every resident in the county.
Let's start with the basic blocks. When you're talking about municipal finance, give an overview in terms of what should people know? How does it work? Give that 5,000 foot level view first, and then we'll come back in and dive in deeper.
I think the place to start, just like with it's not like running a business per se. It's not, maybe not even like your house, but you have to ask the first question: where do I make money? How do I make money? If you're somebody who is employed, okay, I get a salary or I get an hourly wage. Okay, got that. If I work 40 hours, I got that side of the equation, right? I know how much money I can bring in, whether I have overtime or not, or my spouse or my significant other, how much do they make? So you have, in essence, on a sheet, you say on one side, this is the amount of money we bring in per month. For the city, it's the same thing. Where do they make their money? How do they bring in revenue? Okay, that's one side. Then the other side, of course, is the expense side. And this is basic accounting, but it's the expense side. How do we spend? How does the government spend its money? And that may not be as obvious, but I think what I want to talk about is just the questions. If you're a resident, you're a voter, and you can ask your local elected official or your appointed officials or people that work in the city, ask these so that you understand, and that so hopefully they understand, where does the city make its money? How does it get its revenue? And then how does it use that revenue? And to spend on providing you what I consider the quality of life that you expect from your city or your county.
I think one of the things on the income side, and I know we're going to talk a lot about the expense side, the cities do their budgets based on projected income. If you are a regular earner, a W-2 earner, an hourly employee, you can roughly figure out how much you're going to make this year. You can always add a few more hours. Maybe you get a bonus, a sales commission, but your income is, for the most part, 100%, 90% predictable. Cities, it's not, and there's a lot of variables in that. Can you touch base on that part,
Jared? There's three buckets, I think, when it comes to, especially counties are slightly different, but let's just talk about cities. There's three buckets. One is property taxes. People own houses. There's commercial buildings with tenants in them. And that is long and short. You pay, if you're a homeowner or you own a building, you pay a property tax bill. And that money, you think you're paying it to the county tax collector, right? But that money then gets split up. A lot goes to the state, which then sends it back to various other agencies like school districts and the like. Some goes back, some is held by the county, and eventually some gets back to the city. That's one bucket. Second bucket, sales tax. You go out and you're going to go buy a new car, you buy a new computer, you pay sales tax. Again, that money gets collected by the retailer, who then sends that money to the state, and then the state then sends it back, some to the county, some to the city. Third bucket, fees. Maybe you'll run a small little business out of your house and you get a business license, or some cities used to have dog licenses. I don't even know if they do anymore, but they used you pay for a dog license, or you pay for a library card, or you pay for something else. But there's more than just that in fees. If you want to install a new water heater, you're supposed to get a permit for that, and they charge you for that, right? Or if you do an addition and you have to get a permit for it, you pay for that. But there's far more exotic fees that are far more substantial when it comes to developing a piece of property. And in the vernacular, they call those impact fees. But the point of them, they're supposed to address the impact of a new development upon the community. So they can be anything from traffic to school to water, sewer fees, things like that. You dump all those together, that's the third bucket. And there's a side to that bucket that may not be as obvious, but certain cities have what they call enterprise businesses. It could be they operate a golf course, or they operate an airport, or they operate something in which users, I mean, I'll give you an example here in the Tri-Valley. Pleasanton owns Calippi Golf Course, and if you go play golf, you pay your greens fees. Well, that's actually owned by the city of Pleasanton, and the city collects those green fees and hopefully pays for the maintenance and operation of the golf course out of those. It's considered like a separate little side business. Maybe I'll get a bonus, but you also say, you know what? Maybe I'll get a side gig where I can go wait tables on a weekend. It's not really the same, but the idea is with the city, it's like, hey, maybe we're providing a service. People want to go out, enjoy, go play golf or whatever the activity is. But we're going to charge for it. So those are your three big buckets.
You mentioned airports and ports are big revenue generators for cities. Convention centers, Walnut Creek, the city actually owns the Lesher Center. The Moscone Center is a separate entity, but it is owned by the city of San Francisco. It's to invest in attracting businesses and visitors to their cities. And those are big revenue generators, but you never know what happens to those fees when COVID strikes. People stop flying so much, and those fees were impacted, and that impacted budgets. And the big one you're going to hear a lot about in cities around the Bay Area too is the sales tax revenue. Sales tax income is changing how it's structured. People are supposedly buying less right now, and that impacts city budgets because it's predicted income.
Let's actually, you want to break down those three revenue sources before we talk about expenses?
Let's do it.
Let's talk about property taxes. Those of us that own a house, they seem to go up over time, right? Maybe not so much right now, but over time it goes up. Our property taxes are supposed to be 1% of this value. By the way, that's the same of a commercial building, whether it's a shopping center you go to or the office building you work in. It's basically about 1%. That revenue is fairly stable and goes up more or less. It's capped at 2%, but when people sell their house or their building, that gets reassessed. I think we all understand that. But it's very stable. It doesn't seem to go down very much. Cities can rely upon. That's one source. And if you build more, then of course you create more value, which is more assessed value, which means that more money goes into the city's revenue. So let's just stop there. Now let's talk about sales tax. But you're right, it's very much impacted by people's spending habits. If you do have a recession and people decide, I can't afford that car, or I can't go shopping at the mall, I can't go buy as many toys at holiday time for the grandkids or the kids, that all eventually flows into the city's budget, and it impacts it tremendously because cities are very reliant upon sales tax. It's a third of each bucket, more or less. Now, some cities are benefit more from sales than from property tax and et cetera. But as an easy way to think about it, the variables can be sales tax. And if you lose what we call a sales tax generator, like you used to have a very big mall that was just a hit for the entire region, and times change, people's preferences change, and they no longer want to go shopping at that mall, guess what? Sales tax goes down. Or if you get a big sales tax generator. Now, I know it's easy to think about sales tax in terms of retail, but Jared, you got to realize that businesses pay sales tax also. I'll use an example here in Livermore. The largest bus manufacturer in the United States is located in Livermore, and it's called Gillig. Gillig is one of the largest sales tax generators for the city of Livermore. Why? Because when it sells a bus to a transit authority in the state of California, or let's say to a private, they charge a sales tax. Of course, those buses aren't cheap. Businesses pay sales tax also. But again, if you have some bad economic times, guess what happens? It hurts and the sales tax get impacted. All right, now let's talk about the third bucket. Many of them can be used for fees that are collected for operations, like we talked about, whether it's a port, a conference center that is owned by the city, a golf course, airport, or just charging for people to use their services, buying a pass to go to the park. Those get impacted quite a bit. But a largest of what is collected of these impact fees or development fees, they can be quite substantial. They're supposed to be used for improvements. If a school fee is charged and collected, it doesn't mean it necessarily has to be for a new school, but it could be to build a new or upgrade the science wing or to put a new floor on the gym, et cetera. It's intended for capital improvements. If times are bad and people aren't building things, then those fees get impacted. Those are the three buckets and how they can be impacted by economic times.
I think you're right to highlight the bus one. I like that. I was talking to one economic development director, and they were so excited that Costco was coming. And he was I'm expecting we'll make $1.25 million to $1.5 million a year off of this new Costco. And that's a big win for our city compared to Fremont talks about the Tesla factory in the same way you were talking about the bus factory. They get a couple bucks every Tesla car that gets cranked out and sold in America. But when a lot of the big box retailer stores, a lot of the small mom and pop bookshops or toy stores have closed over the last couple of years because we all go to Amazon. Toys R Us closing had a big hole in a couple of cities around the Bay Area, Party City closing. And so that's those variables that the cities can't control when we talk about variables.
I want to talk about that in the context of an ugly truth. Cities compete with each other for sales tax generators. That's not something anybody's going to admit. They all want everybody to succeed. Talk to 4 economic development directors for joining cities. Of course, they want each other to succeed. What's good for one is good for all of them. However, to tell you that if you have a Costco in the next city over, another Costco opens, to think that's not going to take away sales tax revenue from the existing Costco city, you're be wrong. That it does. It has an impact. We all can recognize if I'm going to go to Costco and I can drive 15 minutes of that one or 5 minutes of the other one, which one am I going to go to? And look, I'm not trying to be negative in the sense that cities do compete, but they do. They understand how, and that's the questions you should ask of your politicians are explain why a decision impacts the municipal finances. If you attract a Costco, what will that do? If the economic development director you just talked to said it'll add $1 million, $1.5 million to the bottom line, that is a good question that a resident should ask. Is it a good or bad thing? Because they'll say, yeah, but there'll be more traffic because there's Costco. Everything's a trade-off, and that's how you should ask the question. Okay, you're going to get more money, but what does it cost us to have it there? But they do
Right.
compete. And I'm telling you, more virulently than you might imagine.
And the reason why they go to Nevada or Arizona is those states offer incentives that California doesn't. Livermore just lost a big deal to them for a fusion energy company to New Mexico. And they lost it simply because the state, like, they became good friends with the governor. It's a state with 2 million people. There's more than that in the East Bay. And they were able to offer them $7 million. We weren't able to do that here. That makes a difference, but cities on that micro level are competing the same way for that because they all want that Costco or that big cash generator.
Jared, you probably should mention that it's just not for sales tax or property tax. It's also because it creates good paying jobs,
Right.
which means if you have a lot of folks being employed in your city, they got to go to spend their money somewhere, right? Whether it's as simple as going to lunch during the noon hour or as much as going shopping a little bit and spending money in the city. The cities care about that. They understand it. That is a big deal.
Let's pivot and talk about expenses and budget planning. There was the big George W. Bush expression that I'm going to run government more like a business, but it doesn't work that way because there's safeguards, there's regulations, things that have to go in, but you had a different take on it. Talk through that.
I think it's more like a household because as you and your spouse, your significant other, let's just pretend let's assume you have some kids, you have to make decisions. You can understand, I think I know how much I'll make. And okay, we got to pay for rent. We got to pay for our mortgage. We got to pay for certain things. We got to eat. We understand that. And that's the same thing with a city. Okay, we can understand how much sales tax we expect to get, how much property tax we expect to get. We know how much perhaps development or fees we think we get, but how are we going to spend that money? We know we have to spend majority of that money. And guess what? Public safety. Majority of what a city spends its money is public safety, police and fire. And is that a wrong thing? Maybe not. Most people will tell you, yeah, that's your number one priority. Because what is the city's number one priority? Keep its
Public
residents
safety.
safe. Keep its residents safe. Number one priority. And I think a lot of elected officials understand that. Number one, they get that part. Okay. But like a household, what's your number one job? I got to keep a roof over my head. I got to be able to eat, keep my kids healthy. Most people understand that. It's from there, then cities understand they got to make some choices, right? And do we want to take a vacation? Of course, there's also many flavors of the vacation you could take. You do a stay vacation, you go to the local park, or you could go to Europe or something. But the point is, same things with cities, right? They need a basic level of public safety. They want to keep their streets clean and safe and well maintained. They want to maintain their infrastructure. I used this in the past, but the minute your toilet doesn't flush, you're going to care about municipal services. When you turn the tap and there isn't any water, you're going to care because that is a basic human need that you want to understand. So when you ask questions, that's the sort of things that you look at now. From there, you can ask very good questions about how else you spend your money. A library, great. Of course, library is important. You know, what level of library services should you have? How about, like you just mentioned, economic development? Yes, it's good. We should, like having a sales team, right? The sales team should go out there and drum up business for your business if it's a business, but you need that money. So you should invest in that. The level of investment is really what you need to ask yourself. And I think that's spread across the expense side of the city is it has to make choices, just like a household has to make choices. Is it a trip to the park for a vacation, or is it a trip to Europe? What can we afford? What can we do? And what can we get out of it for the benefit of our quality of our life that we want to enjoy?
And I think that's good. And I'll help bring it back to a city function here. Cities are making choices around infrastructure and services. So you may want to update your library with a new library. You may want updated parks and astroturf and everything like that. But you also might have a number of potholes that have to get filled, or you might have long-term capital needs Can you explain that and then talk about a little bit of how cities make those choices and find that balance?
You hit it right on the head, Jared. There's a part of the budget that is called capital improvements or capital improvement projects. And it's replacing the turf on the field, or it's replacing the sewer lines, or it's replacing some damaged trails and things like that. They have every city creates a list, the capital improvement project list, and puts a dollar figure next to it. Most cities have a certain part of their budget allocated toward making capital improvement. We need to replace that sewer line that goes down Main Street. I can tell you that the list of projects is much longer than the amount of money that the city will have over a shorter term, like a 5 or 10 year. They have to pick and choose. And just a household, you walk by, that toilet just seems to be not filling up right away. Maybe it needs a new valve or something. You look at your budget like, I don't know if I can do it this month, but maybe next month I'll have a few extra dollars. Then you go down to the store and you get it and you fix it. Same idea. You look at what you have. Okay, how bad is bad, right? How bad is it? And decide, okay, this year, this summer, we're going to fix that sewer line on Main Street because it's not looking real good. I don't know if it'll go another year. Okay, we need to jump on that. And then other things on the list got to move down. Those are real life decisions that we all make for ourselves, but cities have to make the same decisions because it would be nice to be able to have all the money in the world said, no problem. Need to replace that sidewalk? We'll be down there next week. It's not that easy.
And the other side, nobody wants to pay more taxes. And so we're cities finding that balance of, like you said, the household budget. How do you stay within your budget? We all want a bigger house. We all want a nicer car, right? We all want that Hawaiian vacation, but you have to balance out what is your priority list. And I think that's what cities are going. And when you talk about capital improvement projects, some cities are full service and some aren't full service. What does that mean? That means a full service city could have the water and wastewater could be part of their operations. Other cities don't do what, right? They have a separate regional joint venture entity like Central Sands in Contra Costa or Contra Costa Water District, East Bay Mud. Those are all examples of this. And those are all generated via fees and property tax. Central Sands, shares, I know, East Bay Mud, Contra Costa Water, they all have line items on your property tax, but they also have fees because they charge you for the water use or for flushing your toilets or whatever, depending on the district. They have to take a 10, 20, 30-year outlook to what is the source of your water? What is the age of your pipes? I was talking to somebody in the city of Richmond the other day, and they were, hey, the streets are half flooded. You know what? There was a lot of rain and your pipes are 100+ years old in that city. So are you replacing them fast enough before they age again? And I think when you deal with increased water fees, you have to stay, okay, they're protecting our water for 20, 30-year outlook. They're replacing those pipes. Those are big capital costs. Talk about how cities, special agencies look at those capital projects and budgeting 10 years out in revenue.
Yeah, it's probably one of the hardest choices they make because it's difficult with the current operational funds to set aside because of course you want to continue providing good services, right? You want that park to stay green and have the flowers. You want all that, but to put money aside to fix the bathrooms in there, maybe that's a harder sell. I'm using that as an example, but I think so and you're right, Jared. Sometimes cities are full service. Sometimes they joint venture with other agencies in order to provide all the basic services. And that's real common. There isn't maybe San Francisco or LA by themselves, but every city generally combines with something else. Like you said, Central Sand or Contra Costa Water or here,
East Bay Mud,
Livermore Pleasanton Fire District, right?
Yeah, fire district, yeah.
They join together to fight. So to get that extra money, they'll do a couple of different things. They can go out and get a loan. Guess where they get the loan from? They flip what they call flip bonds. They ask you, can we increase your taxes a little bit in order to go get a bunch of money so we can make all these improvements. Or sometimes a parcel tax, we're going to charge a certain amount for every parcel, and that money will go toward making these improvements, these long-term improvements. Another idea is that actually you increase your sales tax. And here in Alameda County, we've done that quite a bit. I think we have the highest sales tax in the state, but they're all these little 1/4%, 0.5% for various services and infrastructure the state also does it, by the way. It floats bonds to build new water conveyance systems or new reservoirs, things like that. So those are the three common, but I think you're hitting it right on the head is that the cities, they budget for it and they plan for it. And when they don't have enough money out of operations, they have to look at alternative funding sources, such as debt, getting a loan from the rest of us, who we then help pay it back.
A couple of takeaways within that. Elected officials elected officials are elected for 4-year stints in most cases at a city level, even in these special districts we've named. And they rotate on some of these regional transit boards or et cetera, and 4-year cycles. They have to find the balance of those long-term capital expenses that may never be seen in their term. And what can we offer today to fix that pothole, brighten up the park, and do things that will help get them reelected for another term and serve their community with that touch? What questions should they be asking, maybe?
And I guess that's kind of the point of why I wanted to talk to you a little bit, is how you convey the message to the residents, to the voters. All too often, our elected officials make short-term decisions because it benefits them by making people happy and getting reelected. A lot of the decisions that need to be made, whether it's by the city manager's office or by the city council, impact future residents' lives 10, 15 years from now. And my canned response is, are you working for yourself or are you working for our kids?
Yeah.
I think our kids would like to have a part, make sure that water system is good, clean water, and the sewer system the pipe isn't going to collapse in the middle of a road, eat a car, as we've seen happen in other cities. That's my canned response. I appreciate you want to deliver the goods for the folks that are voting today. I completely understand that. But please balance that with the knowledge that when you and I are both gone, somebody else will be sitting here, and we want them to believe that we made the right decision to preserve a good quality of life in their community by making sure that that water is clean. That's what I hope people think about. At least think about that. At least acknowledge that's part of your thought process.
And I think that's good. The message I'm hearing from you there is to find that balance and be fiscally responsible. It's maybe back to your household expenses. You have to think of the way you do your household expenses in terms of X amount should go towards your 401k and retirement. Maybe you're putting money into a 529 into the California college share program for your kids' college, or you're saving up just for that car, right? You're finding that sort of balance in all of those. And that's what I'm hearing for you in your messaging to people is ask questions that find that balance.
And think about discussion you might have with your spouse, Jared, about saving up for that car or saving up for your kids' college education. You're both honest with each other. You say, this is how much money we're bringing in. This is what we need to spend. We have to have a roof over our head. We need to have food. We have certain obligations we have to meet. We have to have health care, et cetera. But we need to plan for our kids' education, right? We need to save something. Well, at least we want to save. If city officials explain it in the same way, I think people will get it. I'm helping to save for my mythical kids' education 20 years from now, right? Because I'm going to have a nice park that you want to go to, or I'll have a clean water, or I'll have a sewer system that works all the time. Think of it that way. Maybe people recognize it differently if they hear it that way.
I want to talk a little bit about structural deficits. And I know that's not your your expertise per se, but I think it's important. A lot of cities around the region are dealing with a long-term sort of shift in consumer spending, the division of money. Cities like Benicia are being hit hard by the refinery closing. Small cities that just haven't had the growth or the shopping from Rio Vista and Sassoon, I know up in Solano, are having long-term fiscal problems. But that's also happening here. Moraga might be having those problems long term and other places. Talk a little bit about what should city leaders, whether elected or not, what should they be asking along those lines?
I'm sitting in my office in Pleasanton. I mean, it had a $10 million structural deficit and will for a few years, and tried to get the voters to approve a sales tax, very local sales tax, and it failed. This was about a year ago. So they have difficult decisions. In the case, in some of your cases they're going to have to make cuts because, again, the amount of revenue they're going to receive is not going to meet the expenses that they need to make in order to maintain a certain quality. So they have to cut somewhere. It's very difficult to raise revenue because of all the things. Like, you can't tell someone to increase the value of their house or their building. That's a market driven, right? But you can be active in trying to attract sales tax and investment. You can be active in pursuing development. And because that does create fees, it creates new homeowners, it creates new businesses that can be attracted to your town and that will generate. Now, is that a long term? Of course, you're just not going to build a building or build a Costco in a year. It doesn't happen. Look what happened to the Pleasanton Costco that opened last year. That was what, a 10-year, 12-year process to get that. And yes, they were sued and the city was sued, the whole thing. But the point is, and I think that's who you're referring to, what was that economic development director was Pleasanton, was, and now they're going to earn the benefits of that investment, right? They took the time, they're going to get $1.5 million that'll go to their fund. But those are such hard decisions that have, they found some contaminants in some of their water wells. And with assistance of another agency, they're going to figure out a way how to clean up those wells and to provide that clean water. Now, that's a very long-term investment, but again, for the benefit of the community, they're going to do it. They have to, because that, again, we go back to our basics. What we want public safety, we want to be safe, and we want good, clean water.
A specific example came to mind as you were talking from Holly Tillman, in councilwoman in Clayton. Clayton has a special fund for their parks, and I think it's like their parks and rec district, and it's on people's property taxes, and everybody pays an annual fee. That fee was created in 1982 and it has not been adjusted since. Let's say the average house in the city of Clayton of only 10,000 people, which is probably 2,500 households, is $100 per home towards that. What's happened since 1982 to 2026? The price of maintaining those parks has gone up. And if people don't want to pay more or adjust it at least for inflation, what happens? You have to cut services because you have to pay people more money. Everything costs more, from grass seed to gasoline in the lawnmower and whatnot.
It isn't so much that things cost more. Yes, of course they cost more, but it's also that cities, previous councils, previous city managers make decisions and what to prioritize. And sometimes they maybe didn't correctly prioritize. So here you have a situation like the Clayton, where you have $100 or whatever it is on your property tax bill, and people thought it was going to take care of things forever and ever, when in reality, of course it couldn't, because the cost of the guy to go mow that field went up. Of course it did. Of course it did. What, you're going to pay him from whatever the minimum wage was in 1982? Let's pretend it was $2.50, right? Let's pretend that guy's not working for $2.50 anymore. Of course, it takes him the same amount of time to mow the field. But the point is that, yes, things cost more. But the real question that people should be asking is, what is the city doing to not just pay for the additional cost of expenses, but what are they doing to anticipate the increased costs of providing the services? Are they creating a fund where they can draw upon in the bad times And so that in the good times, that money is there. And that's what some well-run places do that. And, but maybe in this case, that was forgotten. And that's something a municipality should really strongly think about. How do we, and they do have funds, they do have reserve funds, but you're seeing them use those reserve funds. But say, we have the reserve fund for a purpose. Times are not so great. Okay, but tell me when that reserve funds are out, how are you going to replenish it? Have you thought about that? What are you going to do differently that it's not always constantly, I got to suck more money out of the reserve fund? That's the kind of discussion I think a city council should have. Okay, we're at a bad time. We need to use a reserve fund. Okay, but let's plan for after that. And I'm not hearing a lot of that.
I want to touch on one other thing, just going back to our Costco examples in Pleasanton. And you mentioned that they were sued. I'm sure they were sued under CEQA for a whole variety of things. It does add traffic. You can't say it doesn't, right? It does change the route. It does slow down things there. It does take more electricity, more this. It competes against the small business, whatever it is. But city leaders have to make the choice of stay the same or grow. And that impacts that revenue long term. Maybe share some thoughts further about that for city leaders.
I got asked at a conference in October and something similar. I made a kind of flippant comment that municipal finance is a lot like a Ponzi scheme. And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, your revenues are what your revenues are, right? Some are pretty constant, some are variable. However, your expenses are pretty much the same, if not always growing. How do you impact that difference? The only way to really impact it is by growing. And I know people say, well, that impacts the quality of my life. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But if you look at it, if you grow, you add more people, you add more businesses, you, of course, increase the tax base. Less property tax, sales tax is going to grow. But more importantly, you also have these fees that you're going to be collecting that can be used to make improvements like fixing the sewer line. So, well, that's how the Ponzi scheme is. You constantly get new investors to pay off the old ones. And they're like, yeah, you constantly get new people into your city who then can be used to maintain the level of services that you enjoy. So maybe it's not the right analogy. Again, I was trying to be a little flippant and maybe more dramatic because it was in front of a lot of elected officials. But I just wanted them to understand it's not that's a horrible system. It's just the system we have. It is this is the one we have. And to say we need to change it, good luck with that. It would be great if you could change how we collect revenue and how we provide service. We could do that. Or we can just decide that let's just deal with what we have. And that is the system which we have. Property taxes are what they are. They go up a couple of percent per year. Sometimes that doesn't keep up with inflation. Now, does it? Sometimes it doesn't. Sales tax, if we have a bad recession, people don't buy stuff, that goes down. We don't have it. And if nobody's building anything, we don't get any fees from development. Maybe somebody should recognize that and understand that if we want to maintain the level of services, we have to do more than just doing what we're doing. We need to understand that growth adds a lot of it. There's a lot of examples of that, Jared. We look at San Ramon. Would San Ramon be what it would be without Bishop Ranch?
I would say no.
You would say
Right.
no. You would say no.
Because it was a base that gave life to the city. And as it's evolved, the developers behind Bishop Branch have done great at evolving, but it attracted a lot of people to what was once a farm town.
That's right. It's not all bad. It's not all bad. And I'm not trying to be a shill for development at all, because I try to look at the world and say, this is the way it looks. And that's the way it looks to me. I don't go to City Center that often, but we went 2 Friday nights ago, 2 Saturdays, saw a movie there. Great experience. Great experience. I'm glad it's there. Not to say that San Ramon was bad before. It wasn't. It was great. But it's great what happened there. It really is. It's an experience that I'm glad the people of San Ramon have, or the people that live around here. I'm glad I went out there and did that and watched that movie there because it was great. It's a great experience there. Adding a new person to your community is not bad. That person might be a really wonderful neighbor to you.
Don't forget, people probably objected to your street being built and your house being added to the neighborhood decades ago. How do people find out more, in touch with you if they have follow-up or questions?
The one good thing about my name, Jared, is if you Google it, you'll find. So I don't, but I do want, if people want to learn more or talk to me, please just Google me. You'll find me. Or if you want to put my office number or my email, I know you have it. So please feel free to post it.
Yeah, we'll connect.
But you can also, some of the groups that I sit on, like Innovation Tri-Valley Leadership Group, check out our website. We're here to, really our goal is to make at least for the Tri-Valley, quality of life of our residents better, and for our business to be successful and to thrive. That's our goal. So if you want to, if I'm putting in a plug, I'll put in a plug for Innovation Tri-Valley.
Thank you for joining me, Splend Splendoria, for this conversation about municipal finance.
Thanks, Jared.
Thanks for listening to the Capstone Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe and follow Jared Asch and Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Leave us a review and share this episode with a friend.